Rabbi Sachs, Lady Sachs, it's a great privilege and pleasure to have you with us this evening. Every university exists, it seems to me, to sharpen the intellect through question and answer. This place exists not to provide all the answers, but to ensure that the important questions can be asked. And for those of us who are people of faith, we experience delight in asking questions, and thereby glorify God in the greatest gift He has given us, the gift of our minds. And it's disturbing to me that even in academic circles, some questions are seen as not worth asking, and some arguments not worth having, and education sometimes becomes the transmission of formulae and becomes entirely passive in its aim. And this concern lies behind this evening's discussion. And it's in this context that I'm very happy to introduce Rabbi Jonathan Sachs.
That is, therefore, an argument from history, why we needed religion then. But I think there is a much more simple answer to why we need it now. And the answer is that that need exists because of the severe self-imposed limits of the four great institutions of today's world: science, technology, the liberal democratic state, and the market economy. Science tells us what is. It cannot tell us what ought to be. Technology gives us power, but it cannot tell us how to use that power. The liberal democratic state gives us freedom, but on principle refrains from telling us how to exercise that freedom. And the market gives us choices, but cannot begin to tell us which choices we ought to make. It follows, therefore, that there is an echoing void, a black hole, at the heart of our moral universe as currently configured. And the various attempts to fill that void over history have not been particularly inspiring. Utilitarianism, the great philosophy of Jeremy Bentham, the greatest happiness for the greatest number, was used to justify Stalinist Russia. The Kantian ethic of duty was used in their self-defense by the Nazi war criminals at the Nuremberg trials. There's the great Jewish theologian Emil Fackenheim, who pointed out that Eichmann, in his defense, used pure Kantian philosophy. Today, the latest trend is completely different. If you read the significant works on ethics in the last 10 or 15 years, whether it's Matt Ridley's Origins of Virtue or Robert Wright's The Moral Animal, or much more recently, just a few months ago, Joshua Green, the Harvard neuroscientist, his book Moral Tribes, you will see that today the ethical inspiration is evolutionary biology, i.e. the belief, as one English scholar put it, that God is an old man with a grey beard whose name is Charles Darwin. Now, I admire Darwin, I respect natural selection as one of the most elegant of all scientific theories, but the idea that we can use Darwinism as a guide to how to live our lives represents the most elementary of all philosophical fallacies, the one I was taught in my first week as an undergraduate at Cambridge, namely the naturalistic fallacy. That is, moving from how people actually do behave to how they should behave. Nature can tell us about the first, it cannot begin to tell us about the second. Or as Steven Pinker, the wonderful Harvard neuroscientist, he is the thinking man's atheist, I have to say. But Steven Pinker was right on one respect. He said, you know, I'm going to do what I have to do, and if my genes don't like it, they can go jump in the lake. Which I think is a rather nice way of putting it, or as I think the best way of putting it was Catherine Hepburn talking to Humphrey Bogart in The African Queen. Is that right? She says, nature, Mr. Allnut, is what we were put here to rise above. And once Catherine Hepburn has said that, there's really nothing you can say. Or as Charles Taylor puts it much more philosophically, what makes us human is that we are capable of second-order evaluations, by which he means this. Yes, we have drives and desires that are biologically configured, but what makes us unique is that we can ask which of those drives and desires we should satisfy and which not. And that second question, that second-order evaluation, is something that evolutionary biology cannot begin to answer. In short, there are three questions that every reflective human being must ask, to which science cannot give an answer. They are: who am I? Why am I here? And how then shall I live? Those three questions, unanswerable by science, must be asked by any self-reflecting individual. And though there have been many civilizations in history, I think none, they each have their own individual beauty, but I think none has given a simpler and more beautiful answer than what we broadly call the Judeo-Christian tradition. Who am I? The image and likeness of God. Why am I here? Because God created the universe and us in love and forgiveness. How then shall I live? By loving and forgiving others. So beautiful are those answers, and so profoundly true, that they will always light the human sky, however many clouds there are between them and us. And it is that vision that led Jews and Christians, time and again, to moral greatness.